Boop boop ba doop boo doop boop 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 ba doop boo doop boop boop ba doop boo doop. Escaping dystopia. Oh, golly gee willikers, Batman, really? So, like I said, it's technology. I'm not sure what's going on with my network. I would try and diagnose it, but I'm not going to worry about it. Because as I teased last week, we might be moving to a new studio soon for our Escaping Dystopia headquarters. And what I mean by that is we're trying to buy a house. Yeah, so anyway, we'll see how that works out. But anyway, so many ways that are any. As I was saying, I tried to do this moment of Bill, so we're restarting. So everybody, if you were joining in earlier, please allow me to apologize so I can do this again. What we wanted to talk about tonight was a number of things that have happened this last week. There was some good news, actually, this last week, which is always good to talk about. Good news is good. That's why it's called good news. And then the way things have been going, it's not always a lot of that. So anyway, talk about Milo and Bill, Mugabe on Trump. He chimed in on that. Spicer and the leaks, a little bit of Gorka and Islam, as I was saying. What to do if you want investigations. And then some hunters out there doing some hunting. And then an update on Kansas, which everybody cares about Kansas, right? And then some movie time fun near the end. Although we can start again with the movie time. If anybody wants to just talk about the Oscars, that's, of course, more than welcome. That was fun last night. I think everybody enjoyed that. Better than my show is going to be. I mean, I can't even get my internet working, so we'll see how that goes. So, one of the big things that happened this week on internet people talking and just media personality in general kind of stuff, the guy, I don't even know his name. I've actually never said it. Milo, Yano, not going to work here no more. That guy, he was on the Bill Maher last week and then came out. He was going to be going to the CPAC, the big conservative political action summit. And they disinvited him after it came out that he'd said some really nasty things about essentially, oh my gosh, so many people were getting so technical with the actual word because they didn't want to say pedophilia, right? Because it wasn't children that he was talking about, but just younger people. So I believe pederasty and PB. Anyway, there's words that technically describe people who think it's okay to bang teenagers. It's not for adults to do that. There's no generally on that one. So that brought down a total douche nozzle. And this is actually good because what we saw here was there are actually limits to what people will actually put up with. There are limits. We saw that with Milo's fall. And we'll see when he comes back or as he tries to reinvent himself. It was hilarious watching that guy dress up as like Joe, college Republican, which is who he is, by the way. The whole gay thing was pretty funny. But there's no credit that goes to that for whole Bill Maher, and for those of you who join in, we're kind of laughing about the good news last week of a douchebag getting his comeuppance, as it were. And it was tough, too, watching the Milo thing take off, and he keep popping up on my feeds. I actually had a friend or two link to his page because, he was doing all this stuff. So, great for that going down. Bill Maher, no credit for that. Could watch Bill Maher. I don't actually watch his show. I'm kind of not really into the Bill Maher thing. The libertarians have always, I don't know if you ever see my stuff on libertarians. They have a special place in my political heart, shall we say. But the real credit, of course, to bringing down Milo goes to Joe Rogan, who's the UFC guy. Joe Rogan and CPAC. So points for those two. We'll chalk them up on the big board. But that was good news. It was always nice to see somebody like that go down. Bannon's going to really need some propagandists moving forward. They had a hard time with that this week, and it's moving towards kind of a critical mass here on their media attacks, and how little credibility they're having left with anybody. Anyway, so there was one guy who actually came out and who's on the whole "you should give Trump a chance" bandwagon, even after everything that he's done, everything that's come out, and that's Robert Mugabe. If you don't know, he's a dictator in Africa. Anyway, Nigeria, you really kind of messed up that whole country. But anyway, so that's the kind of person who... Can someone track the anyways if they're out there? Just put them up on the big board. I really need to learn how to not say that word all the time. But we'll move on. So there was a funny thing today, and we've noticed today, and this is what's been really interesting about this White House and what's going on, and what's from a sociological perspective and political nerd perspective. It's not so often that you have nearly a transparent view into the White House. Normally there is some loyalty. Remember, there's thousands of people that work in this institution, and they're all new or have to come back. So, the fact that this place is leaking so much that the press secretary had to have a special meeting about trying to catch all the leakers, and it was leaked before it even happened. So, and it's just, it gives it a window that's kind of hilarious. And so a lot of the stuff that they're doing, a lot of stuff that's happening is horrible. But there's a window into what's going on that's kind of interesting for those who are into this stuff. The Rogue POTUS staff is by far the best Twitter account for that. And as they keep saying on there, it's hilarious watching them joust with the news. Because these are very obviously inside people. There's so much information coming out left, right, and center. And there's people trying to catch who they are and all that. And them trying to avoid it. And it's just, you got to think of it. This is like a corporation. There's, thousands of people work there, and even trying to stop them all. Anyway, when they're just talking about things that they saw at work or have heard or rumors, and that kind of just rumor stuff is blowing up everywhere. So even to the point there where you have the press secretary Spicer trying to do his sneaky little intelligence thing, trying to find out who's leaking stuff, breaks out everybody's phone, brings out the lawyers, trying to scare them all. But this meeting, he actually gets leaked. Then he also gets burned on the Navy secretary because they had a guy withdraw this last week who's going to be, he's another really guy who made a ton of money working for the government, didn't want it all looked at, so he withdrew. Spicer said he wasn't going to withdraw, and then he pulled out. So, again, massive loss of credibility for the press secretary. His credibility now is pretty much out. There's nothing. There's very little left, and this kind of thing hurts. Now, the question of that, and this is where this comes up, and this is the big thing for tonight, what I want to talk about, the Gorka and Islam. There's a guy, I believe it's Sebastian Gorka, I believe. But he is, it's Sebastian. So he was this guy who works now in the White House, and he's been getting trolled by a number of actual security experts, because this guy is a internet, security guy, where he wrote on Breitbart about Islam. And I don't know if you've ever read Breitbart's Islam, but it's very the Islamophobe crazy. So they're very much pushing this clash of civilizations in Islam. And the notion of, and this is the they hate us for our freedom guy kind of thing. And you're seeing them push this, and this is what has been so interesting, because this guy's been getting totally, what brought his name up is he actually called somebody on the phone to threaten them and talk to them about what they'd been saying about him on Twitter, explaining how this Gorka guy was not an expert, didn't know what he was talking about. And so Gorka called up this guy. This guy recorded the phone call. There's actually recordings of this kind of, this very threatening, why are you making fun of me? Because you don't know what you're talking about, and there's people who are hurting. And so this whole thing has been hilarious. But this guy, just you can Google this, Gorka, just spelled exactly like it sounds. But this is one of the people this is one of Bannon's, anti-Islam people that they've brought in to sell this notion of a huge clash, like they're coming to get us. They hate us for our freedoms. The fact that very much like this notion that Islam is this single organized force that wants to destroy everything that's in its path. These are those people who are selling that. One of the things that I wanted to talk about, and what we're seeing right now, and you need to understand that my perspective here is that what they're trying to do is very extreme. And what we're trying to avoid here with my show and this website is this horrible dystopian future that's a possibility right now. So I'm going to read a little bit from this piece that I ran into this week. And this is kind of one of the core elements of part of this show and talking about what could be coming. Because what we've seen in the past with these kind of situations are patterns. And we have somebody now, especially in Bannon, who sees very much history as this repeating cycle of events. And so looking back at some history that is exactly right about that 80-year epic that he thinks about. And I want to also you need to understand a little bit about the time frame here about what happened. And this is, I'm going to read some selections from a piece called The Red Warning by Timothy Snyder, New York Review of Books. And there's a little bit number of pieces I want to talk about this. One is a little bit of the kind of the terror attacks that we've seen this last week and the reaction to them, which has been not any because they were the wrong kind. But let me get right into this piece. It says, after 1933, the Nazi regime made use of the supposed threat of terrorism against Germans from an imaginary international Jewish conspiracy. After 5 years of repressing Jews, in 1938, the German state began to deport them. On October 27th of that year, the German police arrested about 17,000 Jews from Poland and deported them across the Polish border. A young man named Herschel Greenspan, sent to Paris by his parents, received a desperate postcard from his sister after his family was forced to cross the Polish border. He bought a gun, went to the German embassy, and shot a German diplomat. He called this an act of revenge for the suffering of his family and his people. Nazi propagandists represented it as evidence of an international Jewish conspiracy preparing a terror campaign against the entire German people. Joseph Goebbels used it as the pretext to organize the events we remember as Kristallnacht, a massive national pogrom of Jews that left hundreds dead. So this was one of the events that kicked it off. It wasn't an actual terrorist attack. It was something that was set up of an ideological idea that then this event was used to push forward then the ideas that had already been presented. Recall now, you have to understand that one of the things that Trump has promised to do is eradicate what he calls radical Islam from the face of the earth. We have the weapons to do that. That's not, but he probably thinks they do. This is not a real goal. This is an apocalypse for the planet if he tries to do that. So you need to understand the real danger here is not the destruction of our country from the outside, but compaction and control and oppression from the inside. The article goes on and gives another example of this, and this is a more recent example. Perhaps you've heard of this country. It says, the most consequential example is Russia, so admired by Donald Trump. When Vladimir V. Putin was appointed prime minister in August 1999, the former KGB officer had an approval rating of 2%. Then, a month later, the bombs began to explode in apartment buildings in Moscow and several other Russian cities, killing hundreds of citizens and causing widespread fear. There were numerous indications that this was a campaign organized by the KGB's era, now known as the FSB. Some of its officers were caught red-handed and then released by their peers, and a Russian parliamentarian announced one of the terror attacks several days before the bomb actually exploded. Putin blamed Muslim terrorists and began the war in Chechnya that made him popular. He thereafter exploited more terrorist attacks to consolidate his rule. 3 years later, Russian security forces ended up gassing to death Russian civilians in a botched response to an attack at a Moscow theater. Putin used the negative press coverage as a justification for seizing control of television. In 2004, after the Beslan massacre, in which terrorists occupied a school and killed a large number of parents and children during a violent confrontation with Russian forces, Putin abolished the position of elected regional governors, and so the current Russian regime was built. The thing that's important to understand is, again, even in the Nazi example, it was 1933, then 1938. So there's 5 years, right? And in Russia, you've got even then, 1999 to 2004, 5 years. So it's not something that happens overnight. This kind of thing, even when you have a setup and then an attack, and that's used to justify massive oppression and cut down on the press and turn, it's not something that happens overnight. So there's the final piece on this that I wanted to do, and this is what I'm talking about. And part of the reason, and this is where the Gorka and Islam piece comes in, and the problem with this approach that they're using, this very confrontational approach, and that is the point of doing the confrontational approach. The idea here, and this is well expressed at this point, it says, it is alarming that in a series of catastrophic executive policy decisions, the president's Muslim travel ban, his selection of Steve Bannon as his main political advisor, his short-lived appointment of Michael Flynn as national security advisor, his proposal to move the U.S. embassy in Israel to Jerusalem, there seemed to be a single common element: the stigmatization and provocation of Muslims. In rhetoric and action, the Trump administration has aggrandized radical Islamic terror, thus making what Madison called a favorable emergency more likely. It is the government's job to promote freedom and safety. If we face against a terrorist attack, or what seems to be a terrorist attack, or what the government calls a terrorist attack, we must hold the Trump administration responsible for our security. In that moment of fear and grief, when the pulse of politics might suddenly change, we must also be ready to mobilize for our constitutional rights. The Reichstag fire has long been an example for tyrants, and it should today be a warning for citizens. Best to learn that now, rather than waiting for the flames. Here's the thing. When this happened, it was a week before the next major election cycle. So again, 4 years, 5 years, this isn't going to happen next week, or 2 weeks from now, or a month from now, or 6 months from now. So there's been a lot of kind of, I don't know, overreaction. I will say it's exasperation, kind of so much energy put forth as people watch, but it's going to be a long haul. And the way even the most oppressive regimes took a long time to move to this. So paying attention and being aware and doing all that and doing that now is how you prepare and inoculate yourself against that kind of future. Now, the thing that we've already seen, and this is why, while I say that on the one side that, you know, it took a long time for these things to really become oppressive in horrible other places, we're already seeing the kind of attacks that could be used for this, except they're not. And this is why it's so, what we're seeing is so dishonest, and this is why it's so suspicious, right? Because you have this attack in Kansas, where this guy, it says, authorities in Kansas filed first 3 murder charges against a man accused of opening fire in a bar there, killing 1 Indian man, injuring 2 other people, and causing fears about bigotry to reverberate across the globe. According to witness accounts, the gunman reportedly told 2 of the people who were shot, both Indian men who work for Garmin, a technology firm, to get out of my country before opening fire, and also had used racial slurs during the Wednesday evening shooting. So we had this happen, right? Now, this, of course, no mention by the White House. When they're talked about it, and they actually asked Spicer about the connection, It's absurd. It's offensive to even say anything. But you actually have the president who brought up a knife attack in Paris as an example for what's going on. Now, there was another big terrorist attack a week and a half ago in Pakistan. And this is one of the ones that actual experts on Islam look at this and then look at what the White House and Gorka are talking about and be like, what the hell are you people talking about? So, let me see. The Thursday's terrorist attack, the country's deadliest in years, stunned the nation and raised questions about Pakistani authorities' ability to rein in militant groups despite several military offensives targeting insurgents. A suicide bomber detonated a bomb among crowds gathered for the busiest day of the week at the shrine of the Sufi saint Lal Shahbaz Qalandar in Siwan, a town in the southern Sindh province. On Friday, authorities raised the death toll to 88 after some of the critically wounded died, and the Sindh Provincial Health Department said a total of 343 people were wounded in the attack. So this was a huge attack on a major shrine, one of the biggest Sufis. I'm sorry, I'm not really a Sufi expert. I should probably know a little bit more. Anyway, so this was a huge attack, but no mention at all, nothing, because this is the radical Islam attack on those that they find to be apostates, and the ones that they really care about and the people that they attack the most are the ones standing right next to them, which is the other Muslims. The people who are the most likely victims of Islamic terror are also Muslims, and this is not something that's news to anybody who's actually watched or studied this stuff, but people who want to set up this global war and realign the world in this economic nationalism style that Bannon's talking about need to have a war of religion, these massive religious wars, help them create that goal. And that is their goal, to have that white Christian nation. Anyway, that's what they're trying to do. Now, we had some good news, actually, on this whole thing this last week, because with the connection to Russia happening and Flynn having to resign, which then turned out to be this really kind of strange thing where he resigned for fake news leaks that weren't fake, but they were true because the leaks were true, but the news was fake. I don't know. Anyway, he's gone, which is great because he was a nutball. And the guy who seems to be replacing him has been pushing back on this radical Islamic terror catchphrase that Trump needs to sell to everybody. So that's that part of it. Again, it's a little obscure, and I know a little kind of boring on that side of it, and a little bit speculative because we're talking about possible things that could go down. But when this happens, and when there is a major attack, you'll see public opinion. It's going to happen really fast and really strong. And then from what happened after 9/11, and I remember so much of the spirit of the people at the time, and to see that now I do think there is some serious credibility questions, and that's why I think there is a reason to continue to push on these credibility questions, because when that time comes, if they try to clamp down hard, will there be enough to just break it? Because that's when you have to break it. If not, then the clamps. Give them the clamps. So when the clamps come down, that's when you have to break it. So just FYI. That's my plan anyway, so far for now. Moving on to my next little thing, and this will be pretty quick, and we'll just move on through this. If you want investigations for all this stuff, the Republicans. Oh, sorry, I crack myself up. That's how I keep myself smiling. The Republicans are not going to do any investigations, any serious investigations of Trump. So if you would like to see investigations of what's happened so far and what will happen and get real things going, you have to vote for Democrats. simple part of the way that the American political system works. The Green Party is not going to instigate investigations that will expose Trump's ties to Russia and what he's traded to China to get his trademarks, or what. Anyway, who knows what's going on? What's going on with the Philippines, with his stuff there, and versus the American interest versus standing up to a murderous dictator, as we're seeing step up there, and then again likes Trump, and so we'll see on that side as well. But if you want to see these investigations come in and you want to have some sort of curtailment of this power, you have to just vote Democrats, and I think the whole country will see that fairly soon. That's going to be a long way away. We've got a long time till elections, and a long time, so patience. So a couple hunters shot each other and blamed some immigrants. I don't know if you saw this. This is, again, I don't want to go too much on the immigrant thing this night again, although it is. You should know what's going on right now in the country is the worst. Trump lied utterly about this whole bad hombre bullshit. They're going after anybody they can is a high priority for deportation. Anybody. That's why they want to hire a bunch of people. That's why they want to lower the standards they need to so they can hire even more people quickly. And one of the reasons they do is because, they're coming over to shoot us. These guys shot each other. 2 hunters shot each other. Some reason they're shooting at human-sized objects near the border somehow. Shot each other, claimed that they were shot by immigrants, and shot each other. So stupid. I'm going to wrap up pretty quick because the middle part of it got a little long. I did want to cover real quick, and this is what happened in Kansas, because you're going to see the Republicans roll out a big tax cut package the rest of this week. Kansas is totally screwed right now. They cut their taxes massive to get that growth and all those and those jobs didn't come. That growth's not there. And Kansas lawmakers plan to take up budget and tax plans after they return to Topeka in early March. Governor Sam Brown's back veto of a plan to raise income taxes, add a third income bracket, and ended exemption for pass-through business income barely survived last week. The House voted to overturn the veto, but the Senate fell 3 votes short. We're back to square one, said Senator Carolyn McGinn, Republican Sedgwick, who also chairs the Budget Committee. It's unfortunate that we didn't have enough votes to override the veto. So the hardcore Republican legislature in Kansas had to nearly override the veto of their crazy government. Their budget problems are ridiculous, and they're going to get worse. And that's coming to a nation near you again soon. So that is, we'll see what's going to happen on that. He's going to say, remember when he announces we're going to spend all this money on the military and all that. Presidents don't actually control the purse strings. That's the Republicans in Congress. So keep an eye on them if you want to know what's going on and what the money's being spent on. So, with that being said, I heard the word abiogenesis in a movie this week. It's a movie called Terminus. Check it out if you want to. It's on the Netflix. I enjoyed it. It has to do a little bit with the topic of the show. So you can probably get that. And I think we're going to go see Get Out this week on the movie front. And Arrival is now out on DVD. So we'll have a little Arrival discussion maybe next week if I can get away from the politicos for a bit and just talk about math and science and reality for some time. Get back on the pantheism stuff. Understand why I care about this world. Why we're going to save it. So with that being said, y'all have a great night. And thanks everybody who wandered in and wandered back out. Always great to have people existing. People. Yep. Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a great night. And love y'all. Peace out.